The year is 1893. The world is turning its gaze towards America, a nation still bearing the deep scars of its civil war, a nation of industry, of smoke, steel, and westward expansion. And in the heart of this nation, in Chicago, a city that had itself risen from the ashes of a great fire just 2 decades earlier, something impossible is unveiled: the world's Columbian Exposition. The official attendance numbers are staggering for the era: over 27 million visitors in 6 months. To put that into perspective, the entire population of the United States at the time was roughly 63 million. This means a number equivalent to nearly half the country's inhabitants made a pilgrimage to see this spectacle. And what they saw was a city. Not a fairground, not a collection of pavilions, but a complete, gleaming metropolis that seemed to have sprung fully formed from the marshy shoreline of Lake Michigan. It was called the White City, and it was comprised of over 200 individual buildings, spread across more than 630 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds, interwoven with grand canals and vast, shimmering lagoons. The scale of the central structures is difficult to comprehend even now. The Manufactures and Liberal Arts Building was, at the time, the largest building in the world, a single structure covering over 30 acres of land, vast enough to house the United States Capitol, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and Winchester Cathedral simultaneously. And here we encounter the foundational paradox, the crack in the official story that widens the more you examine it. We are told this entire city, a construction project that would tax the most advanced engineering firms of the 21st century, was conceived, designed, and built from the ground up in approximately 24 months. The historical context makes this claim seem less like an achievement and more like a fantasy. This was an age before the proliferation of electric power tools, before tower cranes dominated skylines, before computerized logistics and heavy earth-moving equipment. The primary tools available were the steam engine for basic power, the horse and cart for transport, and the raw physical power of human labor. We are asked to believe that men with hammers, handsaws, and simple block and tackle systems raised a city of monolithic proportions in 2 years. They didn't just build structures, they terraformed a swamp, dredged canals, and erected a dream. The timeline doesn't just feel ambitious, it feels fundamentally irreconcilable with the documented technological capacity of the age. This is the first question we must ask. Are we looking at a miracle of construction, or are we looking at a story that was constructed to fit an inconvenient reality? Faced with this glaring paradox of time and technology, the official historical record provides a simple, almost dismissive explanation. The White City, we are told, was an illusion. It was not built of marble and granite, but of a temporary material called staff, a mixture of plaster of Paris, cement, and fibrous materials like jute or hemp, slathered over frames of wood and steel. This narrative is incredibly convenient. It neatly explains the impossible construction speed. You can, of course, build a movie set faster than you can build a real city. This allows the entire logistical problem to be waved away. But this explanation, while convenient, is profoundly challenged by the primary evidence, the thousands of high-quality photographs taken at the Exposition. When you look at these images, especially in their newly digitized high-resolution forms, your own eyes betray the official story. You are not looking at a fragile plaster-covered stage. The images depict structures of immense weight, solidity, and permanence. Observe the great columns of the Court of Honor, dozens of feet high, perfectly fluted, appearing to bear the tremendous load of massive entablatures and pediments. Look at the Grand Basin, lined with balustrades and statuary that show no signs of being temporary moldings. Examine the colossal dome of the Administration Building, a structure of profound architectural complexity that would require immense structural engineering to support its own weight, let alone withstand the fierce winds coming off Lake Michigan. The surfaces in these photographs do not reflect light like painted plaster. They have the deep, subtle texture and grain of quarried stone. The edges are sharp, the details are crisp. Furthermore, we are asked to believe that this plaster and wood creation withstood 6 months of Chicago's weather: baking sun, high humidity, torrential rains, and wind, without any visible signs of cracking, sagging, water staining, or erosion. There are no accounts of pieces falling off or facades melting in the rain. The city remained pristine. It looked like ancient Rome, and it stood with the defiance of ancient Rome. The staff explanation feels like a retroactive patch, a simple story designed to paper over a much more complex and bewildering truth. The evidence of our own eyes is in direct conflict with the words in the history books. If the 1893 Chicago World's Fair were an isolated incident, a singular anomaly in the course of history, One might be forced to categorize it as a unique, albeit inexplicable, feat of human will. But it was not an isolated incident. As you pull back your focus from Chicago, a chilling and undeniable sequence begins to emerge across the globe. The phenomenon of the Grand World Exposition, featuring impossibly vast and classically styled cities, was not an American invention, but a global one. The pattern is so consistent it feels like a rehearsed performance. Look at the 1900 Exposition Universelle in Paris. A city of lights and palaces appeared along the Seine, dominated by the Grand Palais and Petit Palais, structures of such ornate grandeur and apparent solidity that they seem to have been there for centuries. Yet we are told they were part of the same rapid construction phenomenon. Then in 1901, the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, created another Rainbow City, a sprawling campus of magnificent Spanish Renaissance-style palaces, all illuminated by the new marvel of alternating current electricity, creating a nighttime spectacle that visitors described as a trip to fairyland. Just a few years later, in 1904, the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, Missouri, dwarfed even Chicago's fair. Its centerpiece, the Festival Hall and the Cascades, was an architectural vision of almost unimaginable scale, a man-made mountain of temples and waterfall. The list goes on. The 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco, with its soaring tower of jewels and palace of fine arts. In every single instance, the formula is identical. First, the impossible construction. A massive, ornate city in a Greco-Roman or Beaux-Arts style materializes on a piece of land in an absurdly short time frame. Second, the brief exhibition. The city is open to the public for a period of 6 to 12 months, a stage for displaying culture and technology. Third, the total annihilation. Almost immediately after the fair closes, the entire creation is systematically and rapidly destroyed. This is not a coincidence, this is a pattern. A repeating, methodical global script. Build, show, destroy. Why would humanity, in a dozen different cities, pour what would be the modern equivalent of trillions of dollars into building these architectural masterpieces, only to have their immediate and total destruction as part of the plan? The third act of this recurring global play is the most perplexing and frankly the most suspicious, the act of erasure. The official justification for the destruction of these magnificent cities was always one of practicality and economics. The buildings, being temporary, were supposedly not built to last and would be prohibitively expensive to maintain or retrofit for permanent use. It was cheaper to tear them down and develop the land. This sounds logical on the surface, but it breaks down under scrutiny. The methods of destruction were often not careful dismantlement, but brutal, swift obliteration. Let us return to Chicago's White City as the prime example. After the fair closed in the autumn of 1893, it was not simply left to the elements. A series of large, devastating fires swept through the grounds. In January 1894, a fire destroyed several key buildings. A few months later, another fire. Then in July 1894, a massive, all-consuming blaze, conveniently blamed on striking railroad workers, reduced most of what remained of the magnificent Court of Honor to ash and rubble. Within a year, the city that had hosted 27 million people was a smoking ruin, soon to be completely cleared away. It was a remarkably efficient and final way to ensure nothing was left for posterity to study. This pattern of destruction by fire or unusually aggressive demolition repeats. It seems to go beyond simple land clearance. It feels like a deliberate, almost panicked effort to scrub the evidence from the face of the earth. If these structures were so beloved, so celebrated as triumphs of national achievement, why was there no significant public movement to preserve at least the most iconic buildings? Why the unseemly haste to destroy them? It's one thing to let a temporary structure decay. It is another thing entirely to set it ablaze. You do not burn down a movie set after the film is wrapped. You burn evidence. The speed and finality of the destruction begs the question, what was it exactly that they were in such a hurry to make disappear? Was it just plaster and wood, or was it a truth too inconvenient to leave standing? Let us step away from the logistics of construction and destruction and consider the very nature of what was built. The prevailing architectural style of these expositions was a triumphant, almost overwhelming, classicism. This was the language of ancient Greece and Rome, resurrected on a scale that, by all accounts, surpassed the originals. This presents a profound cultural and historical anomaly. The late 19th century was the age of the Industrial Revolution. Its authentic architectural language was that of iron, brick, and glass, the factory, the train station, the skyscraper. Yet in the midst of this industrial age, these pristine, white, ancient cities appeared, as if teleported from another time and place. The cultural dissonance is jarring. Why, in an age defined by forward-looking technological progress, was the ultimate expression of that progress housed in buildings that looked backward to a lost, ancient world? The architects of the era, men like Daniel Burnham and Charles McKim, were certainly talented, but we are asked to believe they collectively conceived and executed a unified architectural vision of this purity and scale almost overnight. It's as if they were all reading from the same, uncredited playbook. The architecture itself was not a backdrop, it was the main event. The technological marvels displayed within the palaces, the electric lights, the new engines, the telephone, were almost secondary to the breathtaking spectacle of the palaces themselves. It's possible the fairs had a deeper, unstated purpose. Perhaps they were a form of mass public conditioning, an attempt to introduce the population to an aesthetic, a history, and a civilizational model that had been lost or suppressed. The message wasn't "look at this new light bulb," but rather, "look at the world we came from, the world that was possible." These expositions were not showcases of the future. They were a grand, fleeting glimpse of a magnificent, forgotten past, presented to millions just before the curtain was brought down for the final time. Ultimately, we are left with a choice between two vastly different interpretations of this period in history. The first is the official narrative. It asks us to believe that multiple nations, over several decades, independently decided to spend unimaginable fortunes and human resources to build the largest and most ornate plaster cities ever conceived, using 19th century tools at a 21st century speed, only to immediately burn or demolish them for purely economic reasons. This narrative requires us to ignore the photographic evidence that contradicts the temporary materials claim, to dismiss the impossible logistics, and to accept a series of suspiciously convenient fires as mere coincidence. The second interpretation is a question, a hypothesis born from the contradictions. What if the fundamental premise of the official story is wrong? What if these cities were not built for the expositions? What if they were much older structures that were found, inherited from a previous forgotten chapter of human history? In this scenario, the world's fairs were not feats of construction but massive operations of restoration and unveiling. A lost city is rediscovered, cleaned up, fitted with modern electrical lighting, and presented to the public for a brief, glorious moment. This would explain everything. The impossible timeline is no longer an issue because the primary construction happened long before. The materials look like stone because they are stone. The advanced, unified architectural knowledge was not invented, it was inherited. And the frantic, systematic destruction was not about economics, it was about control. It was the final act of a cover-up, a deliberate erasure of a history that would rewrite everything we think we know about our past. We are not expected to provide the final answer. We are here to show you the evidence and ask the question. The choice of what to believe is yours, but do not make that choice based on the stories you have been told. Make it based on the evidence they failed to completely destroy. The truth isn't in the textbooks, it's in the photographs they forgot to burn.